Story 1. The ridiculous amount of polo shirts layered on top of each other for the final boss of popped collars. Story 2. Don't mind me. I'm only here to torture myself, like that video where high schoolers had a 2000s day and someone commented that's what the 1980s day was to us. Story 3. Medieval Polaine shoes, which are soft leather shoes with long pointy tips worn by men, became so extreme in some instances that it was extremely silly. Story 4. I did a costume history course in college. Although lots of modern fashion is pretty stupid, it really has nothing on medieval fashion. I can't say that they were the most absurd because I wasn't a very good student. But 40 years later, I remember 3 fashion trends. The codpiece that, over the course of a century of development, got increasingly larger until they were like 10-inch long protuberances. The shoe trend that got increasingly narrower and longer, so wealthy women started getting their little toes amputated so they could be in fashion. But my all-time favorite was after the French Revolution. Women were wearing togas to hark back to the Roman Empire. But the accepted style for the togas was to cling to the women's bodies, so they would have their maids spray them with a mist of water. It was a particularly bitterly cold winter that year, and so a whole lot of upper-class women caught pneumonia and died as a result of this short-lived French fashion trend. Story 5. Shutter shades. Because realistically, who could see out of these things? Story 6. Powdered wigs are supreme. Imagine stepping out in a giant, flour-dusted nest of hair every day just to say, "Yes, I am indeed very fancy." Story 7. In the 1990s, the tracksuit with buttons up the sides, which we called rips, was a fashion statement. Some would wear them with nearly all the buttons open. It was an amazing style. Story 8. The jeans under skirts trend of the early 2000s. I knew it was bad when it was happening, and I was correct. Story 9. I remember in the late 80s when girls were tucking their socks into their jeans, and the guys were folding the cuff of their jeans and rolling them. Very chic. Story 10. Back in the 1980s, women wore shoulder pads. Watch some old episodes of Dynasty and you will see what I mean. Laughing out loud. Story 11. Those rubber plastic transparent sparkly sandals from the 2000s that made your feet sweat and slip really badly and gave you multiple blisters. Happy they are gone. Story 12. When people sag their pants, it looks awful and comical to see a grown man walking funny because he is trying to look cool by sagging his pants. Story 13. There was a trend in the 1990s South. I'm not sure if it was widespread, where women wore these ridiculous one-piece jumpsuits with huge square collars with lace. They were absolutely hysterical. Lace and florals with matching bows. Story 14. Puff paint t-shirts or sweatshirts. Does anyone remember this? You would get these little bottles of special paint with a needle tip, go crazy decorating your shirt, let it dry, turn inside out and iron, and like magic, the paint got puffy. Tacky, but we all loved it where I grew up. Story 15. Whale tails refer to the ultra-low-rise jeans with the triangular strip of fabric of their thongs sticking out the back. Usually, they were colorful or had rhinestones. Story 16. Is wearing ridiculously high hems on men's dress pants still a thing? I'm a boomer, yes, but when I saw them last week in Charlotte, I did a double take. I equate those flood pants as out of date as those silly Miami Vice-era half jackets. Story 17. The ultra-wide polyester bell-bottoms of the 70s look pretty silly in movies of the time, including some of the Roger Moore James Bond entries. It is hard to look like a badass international spy when your pants look like sailboats. As one comedian put it, "What is with those bell-bottom pants? Did someone look down and say, 'These pants would be great if I just had more room in the ankles?'" And then there was the mercifully short-lived ultimate expression of that trend, the leisure suit. I used to own a powder blue leisure suit. For a while, I broke it out every Halloween, but then I outgrew it. Story 18. Corsets that were so tight they changed the shape of women's bodies are both funny and a bit horrifying. Story 19. Millennial here. For a while, there was a lot of US who bought chains to have them hanging on their belt. Some even matched it with yellow or white contacts and emo hair. I even had a classmate who wore a wristwatch on his neck. It was funny for me because in the Philippines, some malls have metal detectors, and they would have to remove and reattach those things each time. It would annoy most people in line, but I found that hilarious as someone who didn't ride that trend. Story 20. Leisure suits in pastel colors from the 70s scream disco fever in a way that is hard not to giggle at. Story 21. Sagging pants. Grown men hanging their behinds out while openly being homophobic. Like you're literally advertising your backside. It's even funnier when they're in a situation where they have to run and immediately fall. Story 22. Back when you would tie an onion to your belt because that was the style at the time. You had to do it every time you wanted to take the ferry to Shelbyville. Story 23. Brief high fashion trend in the 1910s was called hobble skirts. Essentially, it was a long dress that got tighter towards the ankles, causing the wearer to hobble in a dainty way by taking small steps just to walk in it. Story 24. Also, units, tubes of fabric you could make into a belt, a skirt, a tube top, or get 3 different colors for a whole outfit. I feel like there was a mall store or kiosk, but enterprising high schoolers with access to sewing machines caught on to the fact that it was literally a hem tube of fabric. Story 25. Poofy sleeves. These were huge in the 1980s. Shirts and dresses could have sleeves that puffed out dramatically at the shoulder. Story 26. Mustaches from the 1900s. I'm sorry, but those big walrus whiskers and slicked up handlebars were just absolutely ridiculous. Story 27. I miss rolling the waistband of my skirt to make it shorter and wearing a super fabric belt to cover the monstrosity, typical of the Australian 2000s era. Story 28. I just watched a 70s movie where the dude's collar exceeded the width of his suit coat. Please, can we leave that behind? Story 29. Crocs. Oh wait, that is present. Look, I understand the rise in popularity in the last few years with COVID-19 and nurses, but the people wearing it for fashion have no excuse. Story 30. During the transition between those big, complicated Rococo dresses and the slim Grecian statue, empire waist silhouette that came into fashion after, there was still a court dress code that required the wide-hooped skirts of before. So, they just moved that enormous skirt up to right under the bust, and it is hilarious. Story 31. Mullets. This hairstyle was all business in the front, party in the back. Short hair in the front and long hair in the back. Often mullets were permed for extra volume. Story 32. Pants below underwear with your rear hanging out as a method to convey that you are committed to that lifestyle. Still popular today. Story 33. It is now common to see young women wearing painted-on, cartoon-like eyebrows reminiscent of Groucho Marx, especially if coupled with eyelashes that extend out inches. Story 34. For a brief time when I was in college in the late 1990s, early 2000s, we were all wearing visors upside down and backward. That sounds so stupid that I am only 50% sure I am not making it up. Story 35. Those big honking lace collars over usually floral pattern dresses that women seem to wear a lot in the late 80s, early 90s. Think Barb from Stranger Things, or if you ever met my mother before 1995. Geez, those looked old-timey even for the time. Story 36. Some people wear unusual symbols of death and torture around their necks to symbolize loving their neighbors or something like that. It's really weird. Story 37. After the first king successfully underwent hemorrhoid surgery, the nobility would wear bloody bandages around their buttocks to make it appear as though they had enough power and money to afford the one doctor who could fix it. Story 38. Lead shoes. I remember a girl in my class getting scolded for wearing them because they were too distracting. She was told to turn her shoes off. Story 39. Victorian-era green dresses were made with arsenic-based dye. People wore dresses that were harmful to them. Story 40. Way back in the Middle Ages, pointy shoes got so long that people started tripping over them. They had to tie the toe of the shoe to the knee just to walk. Don't get me started on codpieces. Story 41. Right now, oversized, shapeless, anti-fit, asexual everything. Ad on the blow-up doll Instagram aesthetic for girls with hypersized lips and brows applied with a paint roller. 2024 is a golden era for looking absolutely disgusting. I understand the social significance and the point of taking the attractiveness and sexuality out of fashion, but seriously, tailors in Italy train their whole lives to make clothes that fit, because people look amazing in clothes that fit perfectly. That's why timeless fashions are timeless. 2024 isn't going to age well.